So then, Claire, I want to come to you with this next question, and it's going to kind of nicely piggyback off of some of what James talked about, and I think he already kind of touched on some of the things that maybe we should be doing to avoid pitfalls or how to recognize them, but I want to dive more specifically into this idea of what are things we should be doing and preparing for on the front end of an automation program so that we avoid any challenges or as many of the challenges as we can avoid heading into an implementation.
Yeah, sure thing. And I will definitely be expanding on some of the points that James made there. To really understand how to avoid the pitfalls, you need to understand the nature of the pitfalls themselves, I think. And on that front, I'd like to start with one of the really common ones, which is insufficient experience within the team, or to be more accurate, not taking the opportunity to combine the subject matter expertise that the business has with the right methodology and the approach that the more experienced automation experts bring to the table. So in the example I shared earlier, we had a client team that were absolutely raring to go, but took a completely inward-looking view of their own processes without an experienced discovery team to guide them. So the team's focused, they're keen to improve. We get that, we want to encourage that. It's certainly preferable all day long to working with an organisation that's reluctant because they're having that change imposed upon them. But it's not always easy to scope the opportunities to the right size or prioritise them correctly, or take what we would see as a genuinely transformational view when you're used to seeing those processes in their current silos. You might not be familiar with the technological constraints and so on. And then very much linked to that, we see a lot of impatience. By that, I mean rushing in without the important elements in place. It's a very, very common mistake. Too many times we see clients trying to dive headlong into a transformation initiative without an automation strategy in place, without a business case, without a plan that's been properly thought through, without the right infrastructure in place. And usually that's looking at elements like the data center, hardware, VMware, network security. And then especially where the business intends to deploy its own capability, you need team members that truly understand IPA, not just RPA bootcamp graduates. And I'll take a second to apologise to any recent bootcamp graduates who might be listening, but you really do need that more experienced resource involved too. And we've seen companies attempt to spin up their own COEs, try to initiate their first programs with people who maybe have a year or two of automation experience at best, and then they call us in to help. They'll often start off without the methodology, the tools, the templates, the practitioner guidance. Another one we tend to see is lack of good governance procedures, even a lack of fundamental buy-in across all levels of the business. And it sounds really obvious, but it's not enough to start out driven purely by enthusiasm because you just can't wait to get started. You want to see those benefits and then hope to build these things from scratch as you go. They've got to be in place at the absolute start of the journey. And then the next one I wanted to mention is probably the single biggest failure mode we see. And we've already touched on this. Emma, you had a few very resonant comments here. Insufficient executive sponsorship. Without that ongoing commitment from your key executives, the program will fail. There's no doubt about it. And it's that sponsorship that ensures the commitment to all levels of the organisation. And lack of commitment is without doubt the most frequent roadblock we see. Mostly we get told it's lack of time. And I will bet that most of the people listening have come up against that at some point. So why don't the people we need to engage have the time to spend that time and effort on us with us? Well, it's because the automation program is usually seen as lower priority. Why is it lower priority? We're back to sponsorship again. Often we'll see the project and consultant fatigue, and we end up spending a lot of our time selling and persuading. Sometimes it's a political issue, and it's very hard, in fact, it's impossible to resolve those situations without that sponsorship in place. And the list goes on. Not tracking or reporting benefits might sound daft, but we've seen a lot of very large, initially successful programs lose that sponsorship, that engagement, that momentum, because people weren't made accountable at the right time for ensuring benefits were realised and reported. Then we have misguided expectations. And I say misguided because we have this industry story that RPA at scale will lead to transformation, and that's invariably wrong. It can, but it's not a given. And that message tends to do more harm than good. So we have to make sure that we set expectations correctly and do it as early as possible, because those outcomes, the art of the possible, it does differ a lot by organisation, by size, by industry, geography, level of digital maturity, and so on.